voted to obviously we had some issues with. It said vaccines save lives. Which one? Do you know how many vaccines there are available right now?
I did not. I am not part of the biology.
Okay.
My book does not talk about vaccines.
Okay. I appreciate that. I want to make people aware. Right now, if you look at the childhood vaccine schedule, in 1960 we had 3 childhood vaccines. Now there's over 100. Wanted to throw this out there. In 1960, autism was 1 out of 10,000 kids. Now it's 1 in 36.
So that Neanderthal in a suit is Todd LeCompte. He is one of CFISD's Christian nationalist extremist school board trustees. He was elected this past fall, November 2023. And in that video, he is questioning a teacher, an incredibly brave teacher, who filed a grievance about the board's recent decision to censor science textbooks. And he wants to ask her about vaccines, even though the textbook that for the class that she teaches doesn't include that. He can't be bothered to know the content of the grievance. He just wants to get up there and grandstand and use his ridiculous talking points. And so hearing that video alone is enough for folks to get a sense of Todd LeCompte. But I want to kind of break it down. And I'm speaking just obviously as a reasonable human being, because any reasonable human being would listen to that and be like, okay. But I'm also speaking as someone, a licensed psychologist who has expertise in autism spectrum disorder and could serve as a subject matter expert in that regard. I have also conducted social science research and been published in peer-reviewed journals and have presented research at well-regarded, legitimate professional conferences. So, I know a little bit about empirical data as well.
On one of the chapters that we voted to obviously we had some issues with.
What's with all the stumbling and pauses and hesitance there, Todd? So, one of the chapters that we voted to, that you voted to censor, that you and your 5 Christian nationalist extremist school board trustee buddies voted to censor last month. Say it. Why don't you want to say it? Oh, that we obviously had issue with. So much issue that you voted to censor. Speak the truth with your chest.
It said vaccines save lives. Which one?
Which one? Really, Todd? More accurately, you should have asked which ones, because many vaccines unequivocally save lives. But if we just want to talk about one, since you said which one, when was the last time that you heard about somebody dying from smallpox, Todd? The smallpox vaccine eradicated smallpox. We've nearly eradicated polio. We were moving in that direction with measles, but then a thing happened that I'm going to get to in a minute. So we're seeing like an uptick in that. We could talk about malaria. We could talk about diphtheria. But just smallpox alone. In fact, in the last 50 years, 14 vaccines have resulted in a decrease in infant deaths globally by 40%. Todd, vaccines save lives. You colossal moron.
If you look at the childhood vaccine schedule, in 1960 we had 3 childhood vaccines. Now there's over 100.
Now, Todd, I know that counting is hard, as is Googling things, but if you were to Google childhood vaccine schedule, this is what you would find from the CDC. And if you were to count in the column under abbreviations, if you were to count the rows in this, there are 30. There are 30. Now, you could look down at the bottom. There are combination vaccines. I'm not counting those because that could actually be fewer administrations. But there are 30 recommended vaccines for children. 30 is not 100, Todd. 30 is very different than 100. I feel like we need to get Todd, you know those little counting bears, those little colored plastic bears that they use in like pre-K and kinder to teach one-to-one correspondence and how like numbers and counting works? I feel like we need to gift Todd a set of those and get him a tutor to work on how to count.
Wanted to throw this out there. In 1960, autism was 1 out of 10,000 kids. Now it's 1 in 36.
Autism. Not that it is even close to the most important issue with what he's saying, but there is something about the way that he says autism, like not his pronunciation of it, but like the tone or something that implies that he thinks that autism is like the icky cooties or something. And certainly individuals with autism experience struggles and difficulties and have particular needs on the basis of that diagnosis. But they also have like strengths and worth, and shouldn't be paraded out to like make some sort of like very misinformed, very gross point that suits you, Todd. Now let's actually talk about what he's implying here. He's implying that the increase in the number of vaccines, there's hundreds of them now, there's a gazillion vaccines, has led to an increase in the prevalence of autism. Todd doesn't know this because he could serve as a subject matter expert on roaches, and that's pretty much it. But correlation is not causation. And in fact, the scientific study that was published in the Lancet 2.5 decades ago at this point, that suggested a link between the MMR vaccine and autism, has been thoroughly debunked since 1998. Thoroughly, unequivocally debunked since 1998. The Lancet actually retracted that study altogether, and that is huge. And the issues that were found with that study were not just methodological. There were methodological issues. It was a case study. There were only 12 participants. It was not methodologically sound or rigorous. But more appallingly, once they started digging in and looking at some of those methodological issues, they found that the researcher, Andrew Wakefield, manipulated the data. He fabricated things, likely due to some pretty significant financial conflicts of interest. He was going to make money off of something that he says this big thing. And so he lied. He's a liar, pants on fire. He acknowledged that he lied and manipulated data. And that was in 1998. But Todd can't be bothered to know anything about that. And it's dangerous that besides just being like stupid and gross, it's actually dangerous and harmful that Todd is from the dais bringing up that thoroughly debunked suggested correlation between the MMR vaccine and autism. And it's dangerous because since that article came out, people were understandably afraid that this vaccine, the MMR vaccine, might cause their child to like acquire autism. Autism is not an acquired disorder. But they were worried about that on the basis of what they believed to be scientific data. And even though that article has been debunked, there is a small but vocal and persistent minority of the population who is holding on to that belief and spreading that belief. I mean, Jenny McCarthy, anybody? And because of that, there are people who do not vaccinate their children at all, or specifically with the MMR vaccine. And we have seen an increase in measles. Look, we had measles, mumps, rubella. We were on the path to eradicating those things. And now we're seeing an increase in those diseases because fewer people are being vaccinated, fewer children are being vaccinated. And it's important to remember that some people can't be vaccinated, and so they were they rely on the herd, right? They rely on the rest of us who can be vaccinated to be vaccinated so that we can eradicate the disease, so that those who cannot be vaccinated don't catch it and aren't just like screwed as a result of that. And so Todd being on the dais and making that link between autism and vaccines is dangerous and insulting and stupid.